Welcome to be Inspyrd Beyond Limits. And this is our second in an ongoing series of trauma talks that we're hosting every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Just to kick it off, if you're out there and you're watching this, just in the chat room, put where you're watching it from. I'm always fascinated by where we attract people. And we often have people on the East Coast or the West Coast. We host this at 12 p.m. so the people on the West Coast, it's only 9 a.m. But we do have people in Australia and New Zealand often join us, and it's like 14 hours ahead of us tomorrow. So that's kind of fun to see. Anyway, so if you could put where you're watching this from in the chat room, it'll be a lot of fun. So I've kicked off this Trauma Talk series by describing the 7 T's of trauma. And last week, you'll remember, or maybe you've gone back to review them, we talked about the tragedy and the theft. Now, quickly as a review, there are 3 kinds of tragedy that befall somebody that leads to them being traumatized. The first is that something happens to them, something very, very bad happens to them. And the second form of tragedy is that they do something to somebody else. And this is the realm you think, well, what could I possibly do to another person that would traumatize them? Well, a lot of people in motor vehicle accidents make a mistake and hurt another human being. Or perhaps the healthcare professional makes a mistake and hurts another human being, and they become traumatized by what they did to others. The third form of tragedy is really interesting to me. It's been studied. It's been demonstrated to be the most traumatizing. That's when you witness something really bad happening to somebody else, but you're helpless to intervene, and you're helpless by one of 2 ways. You don't have the resources to help, or you choose not to help. So those are the 3 forms of tragedy. And then there are small t traumas and big T traumas. Leading thinkers in trauma, like Bessel van der Kolk and Gabor Mate, would tell you that most small t traumas occur before the age of 7. And in fact, Bessel van der Kolk would say that most small t traumas happen pre-verbal, so before 2 years old. Now, big T traumas are episodal. They are, you were assaulted, you were in a car accident, you lost a family member. Those are big T traumas. And the second topic we talked about last week was theft. Trauma is a thief. It steals from people. And the first thing it steals is your ability to sleep. This cannot be overlooked. I'm actually saddened by the lack of acknowledgement that trauma steals our ability to sleep. Now, it doesn't do it nefariously. It does it because part of our nervous system, our part of us that provides our survival skills of fight, flight, or freeze, gets activated at a level, and it stays activated. So we're getting ready to fall asleep, but that flight, fight, or freeze mechanism is still running. Now, normally when you get ready to go to sleep, the flip side of your nervous system should be running, and that's the rest and digest. But with the flight, fight, or freeze mechanism running, you produce a cascade of chemicals and chemistry in your body that absolutely prevents you from falling asleep, because your survival mechanism is trying to keep you awake in case there's danger. Then throughout the night, we have sleep cycles. A sleep cycle is 90 to 100 minutes. That cycle happens all day long. It's called an ultradian cycle. And at the deepest part of this sleep cycle, we have REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. And while we have REM sleep, we dream. Dreams are metaphors designed to allow us to disconnect the emotions of our day from the events. And that allows the events of the day to move from short-term working memory over into coherent long-term memory. Now, coherent means that you can recall the event without any triggering mechanisms. So when a person's sleeping and they enter this deep period of sleep, this REM sleep, and their mind is trying to disconnect the emotions from the content and context of a traumatizing event, their flight, fight, or freeze mechanism kicks in and wakes them up. And this is the realm of night terrors, nightmares. And when you talk to traumatized people, as I have for a decade, they have 2, 3, 4 wake ups every night and it's in this period of deep sleep. Now, if you want to read deeper into this or understand this more deeply, I highly, highly recommend you buy the book Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, and then watch some of his podcasts or some of his teachings. And he actually talks about sleep deprivation, the impact on traumatized people, and that when you don't have this phenomenon happening all night long, that you do not get what he calls overnight therapy. Well, once trauma steals your ability to sleep, it's going to steal a bunch of other things, which we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the mental torment a traumatized person goes through, but we're also going to talk about the physical torture that a person can experience from unresolved trauma. Now, just before we talk about the mental torment, I'm going to suggest strongly to you that it's this inability to sleep, the mental torment, and the mental torture that results in the biggest thefts to a person. A lot of traumatized people lose their careers. They can't work. And then they start to lose their family members because of their behavior. They'll often lose their family. They'll lose their home. So they've lost their career, lost their family, lost their home. And too many, far too many, actually lose their lives. And trauma is a thief. So let's talk about today's subjects. The first one is torment. And here we're talking about mental torment. When trauma goes unresolved, people wake up and they haven't had overnight therapy. So their short-term working memory has not offloaded the memories of the day into long-term coherent storage. Now, our short-term working memory is finite, fixed in size. It is not infinite. So when we don't have overnight therapy and we don't have the release of these memories into long-term coherent storage, we wake up and our short-term working memory is full. Combine that with a lack of sleep and we'll wake up foggy-headed or sprung-loaded to go. The first request of us triggers us into an over-aggressive, over-assertive response. And when you talk to hundreds and hundreds of traumatized people, as I have, when they wake up, they're not good to go. A person who gets a good night's sleep wakes up, they're ready to face their day, get on with their tasks, get ready to do things. A traumatized person who's been woken up 3 or 4 times during that night will wake up, they'll have no energy, their short-term working memory will be full. When this happens day after day after day, you become tormented. The next thing that might happen is you might lose your ability to concentrate. So you can't work on the things you used to work on. Now the mental torment goes farther. Your brain, in this hyper flight, fight, or freeze, highly activated way, is now looking, scanning for threats, making you hyper aware and hyper vigilant. And when you're hyper aware and hyper vigilant, it's hard to relax and it's hard to engage with other human beings. So here we are. We wake up, we're foggy-headed, we're mentally overloaded, our short-term working memory. We're more assertive, more aggressive. We can't concentrate, and we're constantly scanning for risk or threat. That's exhausting. And this mental torment goes on and on and on. Then the brain starts in this scanning for threats, starts pulling the negative past into the present. So now you're living the past present, re-experiencing as if the trauma is happening again, and then taking this past, the past present, and projecting it into the future. This will always happen to me. I'll never be safe. I can't do this. I can't do that. And this mental torment is extraordinary and extreme. And it leads to other disorders. So PTSD is only one of perhaps 10 or 12 different disorders that can arise from unresolved trauma. People can end up in general anxiety disorder. Imagine you wake up every day scanning for threats, thinking your life will never get better, and taking the negative past into the present and projecting it out into your future. You could have dissociative identity disorder, where you start disengaging from the world around you, disengaging from your partner, from your children, from your coworkers, from your friends. You could have agoraphobia, where you're afraid to go out in public. So many of the highly traumatized service members I've worked with, military service members I've worked with, have agoraphobia. And you know, the joke in international humanitarian work is if you walk into a cafe in Nairobi, Kenya, I'll tell you all the traumatized people, because they're all sitting with their backs to the wall, right? They're all sitting in a corner with their backs to the wall where they can scan the room and quote unquote stay safe. The torment goes on. And again, if unresolved, this can be just horrific for the traumatized person. Now, Gabor Mate and other leading thinkers, but certainly Gabor Mate, says that all unresolved trauma is the cause of mental and physical dis-ease. And he goes further to say that the root cause of all chronic pain, chronic illness, is unresolved trauma. This is what I call the physical torture. Now, there's famous books written about it. Bessel van der Kolk's book is The Body Keeps Score, and Gabor Mate's book is When the Body Says No. And certainly there's a massive body of information around somatic experiencing and somatic healing. Now, from my perspective, somatic experiencing and somatic healing are misnomers, especially the healing one, because I don't know of, or I haven't read any, and I haven't seen any peer-reviewed, rigorous research that says doing somatic experience or somatic healing actually heals trauma. So the person now sleeps easily, they're not triggered, they don't have any of the classic symptoms of trauma, that they're actually healed. However, the body of knowledge of somatic work is incredibly powerful at helping people lower the symptoms of this physical torture. So what are some examples of the physical torture? Well, fibromyalgia. You know, I haven't found literature that directly links unresolved trauma to fibromyalgia, but I've had many, many clients who have had fibromyalgia. And when we release, that's the term we use for healing trauma, when we release the trauma so that they're no longer triggering those events from the past, they're no longer triggered by them either, the fibromyalgia goes away. And again, Gabor Mate would say fibromyalgia is a result of unresolved trauma. Chronic pain. Again, he says that chronic pain, chronic fatigue, IBS, fibromyalgia, everything chronic is a result of unresolved trauma. And we've done enough work with enough clients that we absolutely agree with him. Gabor Mate will tell you, and I think there's a large body of information in the US prison system that says every person in jail has unresolved trauma. Now, that's a pretty big sweeping statement, but that's some of the belief that's out there. And so this physical torture really starts to impact a person's life. They end up on radical medications. They'll end up on medications first for their inability to sleep. Then they'll end up on medications for depressive disorder or any OCD or whatever disorder they manifest because of the unresolved trauma. And then they'll end up on a cocktail of drugs for this physical torture, the pain that comes with it. Now, one of my, I shouldn't use the word favorite, but it is one of my favorite examples of the torture that a person experiences from unresolved trauma is my friend Shane. Shane is a superhero. Shane was in Arafat's compound and administered Arafat's Parkinson medicine just before Arafat went live for the last time on TV. He was the head of the International Red Crescent in Jenin, Palestine in the early 2000s, in one of the early intifadas. He's a firefighter, paramedic, who was so traumatized and tortured and tormented, it cost him everything I just told you about: his family, his career. And then he got chronic hives on his entire body, hives that would get into his airways and stop him from breathing. And when I finally got the opportunity to to work with Shane, it was after we had met and gone and done our master's degree together. Then we both ended up in Iraq together, working for a landmine clearance company. Shane was our paramedic, our lead medical guy. I was a paper pusher, but my life was in Shane's hands in Iraq. If I got hurt, it would be Shane that saved my life. So fast forward over a decade, we're back in Canada, and Shane is suffering extraordinarily with these hives. He's been to clinics all over North America. Nothing can happen. Nothing can help him. And I said, well, let's try releasing your trauma. So Shane and I worked on his trauma together. And as we released his trauma, I'm looking across at him and I could see the hives leaving his throat because he was quite triggered when he came to my office. I saw the hives leaving his hands. And I said, Shane, look at your hands. And Shane looked down at his hands. And then he opened his shirt. And then he looked at his watch. And I said, Shane, I understand why you looked at your hands. I told you to do it. And I think I understand why you looked at your chest, because you're watching the hives disappear. But why did you look at your watch? And he said, I looked at my watch because I'm 2 hours past my meds. Now, what were Shane's meds? Shane was drinking an entire bottle of Benadryl every day just to breathe, just to keep his airways open. And so post healing the trauma, Shane still had a bunch of stuff happen in his life, but his hives are, I would say they're gone or 99% gone. He still has a reaction sometime, but they're not debilitating as they were before. So that's an extraordinary example of physical torture. And I'll just share one more. I had a 38-year-old female client who came to me with extreme trauma, sexual trauma in her youth. She'd been on social assistance for quite a period of time. And 3 weeks or more of a month, she would have massive fibromyalgia to the point where she was using a walker. She was in that much pain. Now, I didn't tell her, I didn't say, look, I think your symptoms of fibromyalgia will decrease radically. We just went to work and healed her trauma. And on a personal level, she is now employed. So imagine she was on social assistance, getting assistance from the government, and now she's actually working every day, contributing to the system. So that's a massive transformation. And she doesn't have the symptoms of fibromyalgia anymore. She does have some scoliosis or some other physical structure in her back that she works with, but she does not have the symptoms of fibromyalgia. She's not taking the medications for fibromyalgia. She no longer has to use the walker that she was using before. To me, that's extraordinary. So again, we're going to, somehow I ended up at number 5. That's pretty funny. That's only 4. Anyway, so week 1, we dealt with the tragedy and the theft. This week, we dealt with the torment and the torture. Next week, we're going to deal with tenacity, the need for people who are traumatized to be tenacious. And then we're going to talk about treatment. Where is the leading edge of trauma treatment today and what's possible? And then 2 weeks from now, we're going to talk about triumphs. We're going to talk about, we'll go through a bunch of case studies. I don't know how many we'll get done in a brief AMA session like this, but we'll talk about as many as you want. And so I really look forward to finishing week 3 and week 4 on the 7 T's of trauma. I hope to see you then. Again, you can see these on replay. They're on our, I guess they're on our YouTube channel. And so you can go back and replay these. I would also encourage you, if you're interested, hit the link in the comments below or in the description below. There's a link to our ebook called Inspyrd Healing. And if you're interested in learning how to help other people who are traumatized or potentially help yourself, take a look at our 12-week certification course. The link is in the description as well. So we have an ebook. Yeah, you can see the Explore the Clinical Applications of NLP. We have the Inspyrd Trauma book link, and really, really encourage you to take a look at those. Now, yeah, the other thing I'll offer, I don't know if the link's there, but if you want to have a conversation with me, go online. There's a link to book a consult and just have a conversation. There we go. It's in there as well. And I look forward to seeing you again. So we'll stay here now and see if there's questions in the chat room. And let's see. This is new technology for us, so we're working off StreamYard. So I'll just wait to see if the questions come up. They should come up at the bottom. I don't see any yet. So we've got some, yeah, we've got a person watching in Kitchener. I can't see a question. Yeah, I still don't see a question. Oh, how can NLP help with traumatized people? Boy, that's a big question. That's like another 3 hours. In NLP, we get to the root cause of the trauma. We don't deal with the symptoms. So almost every other modality that I'm aware of deals with the symptoms. So if you do somatic healing, energy healing, if you do cognitive behavioral therapy, they'll ask you what you're experiencing today, and then they'll deal with the symptoms, right? In NLP, we seek the root cause. And we have some tools, techniques that allow us to get to the root event, the first event, which traumatized a person, or the most significant event, and we release that one. When we release that one, that allows the person to normally sleep that night, and that memory to move from short-term working, triggerable memory to go into long-term coherent memory. And so what's a coherent memory? A coherent memory is the ability to talk about an event which used to be emotionally triggering, but now talk about it without any inappropriate or unwarranted negative emotional arousal, and talk about it clearly, coherently, and in detail. That's a coherent memory. When that happens, then the flight, fight, or freeze mechanism, primarily run by the amygdala, scans forward and back in time and reevaluates all the events of a life. And in research, by a number of agencies, they found that so if a person had complex PTSD and they were traumatized over a 20-year period, you don't have to clear every event in the 20 years. Can't happen. You clear the root event and then the significant events, and it's as if the amygdala scans forward and back, reevaluates all the other events, and normalizes them in some way. And really, this gets to my major advocacy, which is that trauma is an injury that can heal. When I take that approach, you know, I've cut myself severely in the line of my work, and it healed. I've broken collarbone, arm, and tibula and fibula. They've all healed spectacularly. And so if I approach trauma the same way I approach my physical healing, and I believe that trauma is an injury that can heal, then when we do NLP and we release root causes and other significant events of the past, then the people actually heal, and they literally re-imprint their history and the present, and they no longer drag the negative past out into the future. They can actually connect to an abundant future. They start demonstrating behavioral flexibility. That's how NLP helps traumatized people. How do I know if I'm stuck in mental torment? That's a great question. You know, I have a lot of dark humor in me. I think I would ask your spouse, is your partner mentally tormented? And I'll get a very clear yes or no. Mental torment, if we sit and we mentally spin and we can't get out of loops where we just keep playing the same negative loop over and over and over again, charged negatively over and over and over again, that's torment. And if you're not sleeping and you wake up and, you know, a child drops something in your house and you jump off the couch, you know, jump off the deck when you hear a loud noise, that's mental torment. I mean, you could quickly identify what is normal behavior and then how am I behaving. So when you hear a loud car horn, or a loud noise, do you jump out of your skin, or do you just become aware of the noise, analyze it, and keep moving forward? Right on. Cool. All right, again, I want to remind people, please, 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 you can book a consult with me if you just want to talk about trauma and what's possible. You can actually look at our certification course. Now, it's not specifically about trauma, but here's what I say. If you're going to work with people and help people become unstuck, you need to know that all of us have experienced small t trauma, and about somewhere around 30 to 40% of the population experiences big T trauma. And one of the stats that gets thrown around is that 68% of Canadians will experience PTSD symptoms in their life. So if you're a coach, if you're a clinician and you're working with other human beings, then you need to be able to deal with traumatic events. And we have a complete clinical applications of NLP and neuroscience for healing certification course. Look at that. It may be for you. It may not be. It's a rigorous course. It may not be for you. This isn't a soft, read a book and then tell people you're a clinician. This is rigorous work. And last, then we have the Inspired Healing book, the ebook. So again, thank you for being here today. There's 3 offers for you. I hope you take action. Cheers.